Hello, my name is Bailey Jones and I am a student at Washington State University, currently enrolled in the School of the Environment's Natural Resource Ecology class. Today I will be presenting to you about the Kamiak Butte ecosystem. In the northwest corner of the North American continent sits Washington State. Washington is best known for its diverse and beautiful landscape. From tall mountains, wheat fields, and coastal beaches, Washington State has a diverse and rich ecosystem. A good example of this is Kamiak Butte, a popular recreational area on the Palouse, located on the eastern side of Washington State. Its unique wildlife, vegetation, climate, and overall ecosystem provide a good example of the rich geological history of Washington State. We will further examine this region in this presentation. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the butte is the history to be told by its sediment layers. Our examination will begin 100 million years ago, when the butte and the rest of Washington were entirely underwater. While this occurred, Kamiak Butte was covered in underwater quartz sand, which would eventually turn into a layer of quartzite. This is the first layer that can be found on the butte. Millions of years later, tectonic plates began to shift, causing volcanic blooms and magma to seep up through the cracks. This magma would later harden into a basalt layer, which makes up another layer of the butte. The picture on the right of the screen depicts an exposed basalt column. This basalt layer was later shaped into the rolling hills of the Palouse that we see today. This forming happened at the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers caused great floods in this region of the country. These floods also caused a layer of lowest soils to cover the Palouse, giving optimal growing soil for the vegetation that would later grow there. The next aspect of Kamiak Butte's ecosystem that we will examine is its climate. Kamiak Butte's continentality has a large impact on the climate and weather patterns seen at the butte. Because of its position, it falls into the marine modified continental macroclimate, as can be seen in the figure above. This macroclimate is known for temperature extremes, heavy snowfall, and specific growing seasons. As well, Kamiak Butte has the marine polar air mass affecting its climate, which is known for being cool and moist. This is the primary cause of Kamiak Butte's extreme winters. As well, the Rocky Mountains trap a cold air from the continental air masses, causing for already cold temperatures to be even colder. This graphic was made from pulling data from a program called PRISM. It shows the temperature as a line graph and precipitation as a bar graph. This shows temperature extremes scaling as high as 80 to 90 degrees and falling as low as 20, while also showing the influx of precipitation during these colder months. Kamiak Butte's climate has to do with the biome that it is a part of. Biomes cover large areas of the earth and have a specific set of wildlife, vegetation, and weather within them. Kamiak Butte sits in the North American western interior shrubland and woodland biomes. This biome spans from parts of the Canadian Yukon Territory to Mexico. This specific biome has nutrient-rich soil brought from glacial floods and changing earth layers. We will further examine some of these characteristics, starting with vegetation. Kamiak Butte's south aspect is much drier than the north. Because of this, many shrub and bush species reside here, and a few ponderosa pines. But the north aspect is much denser with a high canopy, including trees and many more types of shrubs and bushes. This figure demonstrates the types of trees on Kamiak Butte. As can be seen, there is populations of western larch, ponderosa pine, and Douglas fir, with Douglas fir being the largest percentage. Another aspect of vegetation to be considered is the carbon sequestered inside of it. Energy flow in an ecosystem is controlled by both biotic and abiotic factors, one of which is carbon. Carbon serves as an important source of energy through nutrient cycling. Carbon is abundant in the atmosphere as CO2. Carbon is cycled by plants. It is absorbed by plants during photosynthesis and then remains as plant biomass. It can then be consumed by animals and passes through the food pyramid. Carbon can also be released back into the atmosphere through cellular respiration. Overall, 456,405 pounds of carbon are stored on the butte today. This is essential to the growth of the trees and the productivity of the overall ecosystem. The figure on the right shows the total carbon sequestered on the butte by each tree type. demonstrating that Douglas fir represents a large percentage of the carbon storage on the butte. And the figure on the left demonstrates which part of the Douglas fir retains the most carbon. Wildlife is also an important part of Kamiak Butte. Elk, coyotes, mule deer, white-tailed deer, magpies, and turkeys are some of the common species encountered in this ecosystem. Uniquely, speciation can be observed at the butte. Through speciation, white-tailed deer diversified into mule deer to fit specific habitat niches. However, in some places, these two species interlapped. Kamiak Butte is one of those places. Many of their differences come in the form of morphology, mule deer adapting to have thicker antlers and a differing coat color. Kamiak Butte is one of the only places these two species interact and are at risk for crossbreeding. As previously mentioned, many other species inhabit the butte, including another species that has gone through speciation, the Rocky Mountain elk. These animals leave an impression because of their destructive migration, trampling over lots of vegetation in their path. But elk are not the only mammal affecting the butte. Anthropogenic activity has changed the ecosystem surrounding the butte in many ways, primarily through farming. The natural vegetation around the butte has been turned over many times for farmland, abundant crops being grown there, changing the natural vegetation to crop foods. Not only was the vegetation and soil texture changed, but the habitat of animals. These changes created a perfect habitat for cougars. Kamiak Butte is an important ecosystem for the plants and animals that live there, but it is also a well-loved recreational spot for the residents of the Palouse today. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Go Cougs!